Hey everybody, and welcome to the Irish Wrestling Podcast. This week, I'm actually joined by a very special guest. Some of you may not know, you may have heard his voice all over Ireland, maybe in some Supervalu stores, maybe some Mr. Price stores.
It's always the one people say, Mr. Price, no way. Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like the thing he does, you do the Conor McGregor bit on Mr. Price. So you do his voice.
Yeah, so I've done loads of stuff for Mr. Price, like everything in between. But I've cut off your introduction completely because
Oh,
I
it's
was just so
okay. It's
excited to
okay.
talk about it.
This is Stephen Daly from Today FM, from 98 FM. If you don't know him, you know him by now.
It's definitely one of those things where people go, "Oh my god, I know your voice." Yeah, yeah,
Stephen,
totally, yeah, yeah. And then I get into some of the stuff I've done, like you say, Today FM and 98 FM. I worked in Channel 4 for a while in the UK, but the one that people always go, "Oh my god, I heard you in Mr. Price. That's
yeah.
amazing. That's so cool." And like, it's mad, just that this like pound shop that has
But it's probably the best point shot. No bragging. I'm not throwing out looking for any
yeah, of
merchandise
course, yeah, yeah.
bashing any other stores. But it is there's so much stuff in it. You could spend the whole day in there. So when you do spend the whole day in there and you hear the voiceovers and you're like, we always end up in the toy section looking at figures because wrestling fans, we love action figures, and sometimes they have wrestling merchandise in there.
Of course.
So you'd be sitting around, playing with them like as an adult, and
So good. So good.
like
Yeah,
so
anyway.
good. So, is that really Conor McGregor? Like it can't be. There's no way Mr. Price paid for that.
Mr. Price, cheap and cheerful in every it's just stretch of the word. That's why they get me.
Steve, how did you get into it? How did it start? Did you start off doing DJing, or did you start off?
Yeah, so I mean, look, getting into it is something I've always wanted to do. Like, I mean, my dad used to do pirate radio back in the 80s on a small part. So I'm in North County Dublin, and there was a pirate radio station here called Community Radio Fingal back in the day. Dad was involved with that, so radio music was always on in the house. And like obviously don't remember, but I remember my parents telling me over the years, like when I was kind of two, three, four, I wouldn't sleep at night unless a particular DJ was on 98 FM. A guy called Mark Byrne, who now flies planes and doesn't do radio
Nice.
at all. So he was the guy, and I wouldn't sleep unless he was on the radio. So radio was always on, music, records was always on around the house, and I always said like, oh, I fancy doing a bit of that. But it's a complete paradox insofar as like I was a really shy, awkward, nerdy, quiet kid. Excuse me, and like to the point where my parents would go in for parent teacher meetings and the teacher would be like, no, there's no like Stephen Daly in my class. We don't have anyone here because like I just wouldn't. And I was a grand student, like average, fine, but reading in class or any of those things I just wouldn't put myself forward for at all. So this idea of wanting to be like a presenter on the radio and on TV, like it was completely at odds with how my personality was. So I suppose it's you just to harbor this thing inside as a way to for all the kids out there, it's a way to follow your dreams and just kind of come out of yourself a little bit through kind of a persona almost, like and I suppose I'll get back to more of my career in just a second, but I suppose kind of in wrestling in a way you're kind of playing this part almost like this
Oh,
version of yourself, like that
100%.
you're larger than the actual reality of yourself, if you know what I mean. So yeah, that was kind of it. And then like when I got to kind of 12 or whatever else, I remember doing my first DJ gig at a community party here for Millennium Eve, as 99 into
Yeah,
2000, we
yeah.
were playing the records with my dad, and kind of always said, you know what, this is it, this is what I want to do. And like from there, like I did my leave insert, whatever else, and I went for work experience in FM 104 in Dublin. And in fairness to them, they saw I was into it, so they were like, look, come in at holidays and weekends, and we'll find you something to do, like everything from making tea to like photocopying paper to
Yeah.
shredding paper, like all the silly little jobs you do around the place. So they kind of kept me going. And when I finished school, I said to my parents, look, I want to go and do this media thing. And they were like, okay, yeah, look, you can do it, but you need to like apply for a proper course and have it as your fallback option. So I was going to be an English and religion teacher, random. Never went to do it though. So I went into the 2-year diploma in media in Ballyfermot. And like I would love to say the rest is history, but that sounds really cheesy to say that. So yeah, kind of just took it from there. So it's just worked my way through kind of a load of different radio stations in Dublin. I was in iRadio for a while rather, in the Midlands and the west of the country, and back to Dublin, then to Q102, and found my way into TV then. So I became a continuity announcer in between like the shows on UTV Ireland, which like nobody really watched. And
We
yeah, from there,
watched it at home. We got UTV in Donegal, so we were okay.
yeah. So you got good UTV though, didn't you?
Yeah,
Like you
yeah.
got the one from Belfast with our
We
Julian
had
Nye on the
we
UTV.
were
Yeah,
forced to watch Carney Street, but we had to force to watch Julian Clary.
yeah. Julian was awesome, to be fair. So so
You
I
watch
did I did the Julian job, but without any of the actual talent that
it.
Julian has, So I did that for a while. Then I found my way to be a weatherman
Oh yeah,
on Virgin Media and on RTE. So like, from kind of not wanting to speak in class to
yeah,
finding myself on the radio to finding myself on the TV was a complete
yeah.
mind-blowing like situation altogether. So between the jigs and the reels, worked loads of cool places. RTE, then I moved to Channel 4 in the UK. Today FM is kind of where I am now. And yes, that's kind of a potted history of my career.
That's mad. Like when you go, like you said, like behind, you're not out in camera, you're behind doing radio. So like maybe if you have it like a nervous deposition, like and you can't stand up, like I was like that for years as a teenager as well. Like standing up in class reading, and I was, no, my legs would be like jelly. I couldn't. I'd have to
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
speak at all, and my throat would dry up. I was hopeless.
You just kind of find yourself,
Yeah.
kind of going, you like I say, you kind of put on a bit of a mask or a persona over yourself, and like you're still you, but you're like the wildest, wackiest version of yourself. If that's not too ridiculous to say, it's the strangest thing ever. But I'm sure somebody's written a book on it in the psychology behind it all.
I hope so. I love to read
Yeah.
it. Speaking of like, how did the connection between radio and TV happen? Like, was it your voice that people heard, or was it?
Yeah, it was kind of one of those things. So while I was working in radio, doing radio shows and like voiceovers for different kind of commercials or whatever else, I was working in Q102, which was owned by UTV, and then they opened that like Dublin offshoot of Belfast UTV in
Yeah,
the same building. So literally, I just knocked on the door downstairs in the same building and was like, "Hey, so I do all this stuff upstairs. Do you need like continuity announcements?" And they were like, no, I think we're okay. And then like it was one of those where I was like, okay, cool. Well, if that changes, come back to me. And then within a couple of weeks, they were like, do you remember you were asking if you could do this? Well, actually, we've got something for you. So kind of completely by accident, like a fluky kind of just right place, right time, just taking a chance kind of situation.
that sounds like a dream come true. Like, but did you imagine yourself growing up, like, when you wanted to be, did you want to be on TV? Was that something you
I
picked?
did always used to pretend to be a weatherman, like way back in the day, when you'd be like standing in front of the door doing
Yeah,
the magic hand. But kind
yeah,
of like kind of growing up, like not that we were like super poor, but it was like a working class community in
yeah,
North
yeah.
Side of Dublin. Like you didn't know anyone who did these things. You'd no idea that people like you could go and do these things. Like it's kind of it was just completely like alien and out of the way. I think this is a very deep thing to say, but I think like the years of the Celtic Tiger kind of changed that for everyone. Like everyone all of a sudden would be whatever you wanted to be, whereas before you were just kind of going and getting whatever job your dad did, or like in a factory or in a
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And I think it just kind of opened so many doors, and like I just was fortunate to benefit from that, I suppose.
Brilliant. And I know you're with Today FM. You've got that regular slot. I think Ed Smith used to have the 7 to 10 slot Monday to
Yeah, so I'm on evening 7 to 10 and Saturday between 11 and 2, which is
the
a lot of
80s
fun.
anthems. Is that something you do regularly? Or is that
The which one, sorry?
80s? You do like an 80s anthem
Oh,
show?
so yeah, so I cover that actually. So there are two Stevens who work in Today FM. Steve K is a guy who does the 80s show, but when he's off, I'll be stepping into his shoes and doing the 80s stuff. I mean, like the way it is, right? Steve's a cool guy, like probably the ultimate radio DJ. But like, he's what, in his mid to late 40s, maybe his 50s. I am 35, but for some reason they seem to think we are the same age. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Maybe I'm just super worldly or just super old looking.
You've been around the block too many
That's
times already.
far too long.
How does it work? Not to go into details with Today FM and their methods and stuff, but do you get a chance? Do you get a choice of what you get to play?
So a lot of it is, across all radio really is set for you these days. I mean, particularly in commercial radio, in places like RTE, you do get a bit more of a scope on it.
Sure.
In particular, if you're doing a specialist show in like RTE, but the way radio works, to be scientific about it, it's commercial by its nature, so it needs to sell ads. To sell its ads, it needs to define who's listening to it and when. So there's an element of having to schedule the programming to appeal to that particular audience at that particular time, so that you can then sell to the advertisers that particular demographic of people.
Okay.
So not as much control as you'd like to have, but I always try and inject a bit of personality or humor or something into the bits that I can control on.
And just something you do have control of. I've seen on social media that you do like a coffee tasting, like the Daily Grind thing.
So just through kind of being a nerd for this, obviously, like I'm a nerd for so many things, but like one thing I love is coffee, and obviously being in media as well, I wanted to learn kind of more about, keep my on camera skills sharp. I mean,
Yeah,
sharp is probably the wrong word, but like, relatively a little bit pointy, in any sort of way that anyone would want to watch. And then also to kind of work on my, video editing skills, my lighting skills. So there's loads of different crafty bits to this, like, hands-on nuts and bolts, which I do love getting into. So because I'm a coffee snob, I started doing this little thing on my Instagram, which is, we called it Daily Grind. And like, I basically get beans from various different roasters in Ireland and abroad, give them a try, kind of describe the flavorings and whatever else. It's a bit of crack for me to do. It gets me tasting
do
some
they
really
send
interesting.
them to you, or do you go to the places? Or
Bit of both, to be honest. Like, so at the start I would go on and like order like, different ones from different places and kind of tell them, like, I'm putting this up here, and then they would share it. And now places, it's gotten to the stage where places are reaching out going, oh, I've got something you're going to love. I'm going to send this over to you. Give it a try. And I'll make a video out of it, that kind of way. And like, look, as I say, it started off as just wanting something to do with like all of the gear I have, my green screens and my lights and whatever else, and just kind of, yeah, look, it's something that keeps me
it
keeps
sounds
me
like it
going.
could be a great TV show if you got the backing for it.
It'd be awesome. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's something that I do think, like, and you'll know this as well from wrestling too. Like, niche is the future of
Yeah,
mass media. Like, this thing of sticking a show on at 6 o'clock and everyone from 9 to 90 is going to watch it
yeah, yeah,
isn't a thing anymore. People record the bits on TV they want to watch, or else they stream the stuff they want to watch when they want to watch it. They binge the whole lot. You listen to a podcast because you can control when and how you
yeah.
listen to it, or Spotify or whatever else. So this whole thing around niche is key. So I think, there's a coffee niche there. So who knows where it will end up? I mean, obviously, if the
A good
wonderful production
80%.
executives are listening to this, like, give
Yeah,
them a
but
bit.
80% of the population, like
Yeah,
halfway, like,
for
and
sure.
finding new places. That could be a way of like every coffee. There's so many coffee shops and cafes in the country that are
One
opening
of
up.
these.
Like even these huts are, since
Yeah, like horse boxes and stuff, like,
yeah,
was massive during COVID. It's one of these things that I definitely need to put more effort into it, get better at, and then start like taking it around to these places.
yeah,
But when you're kind of just going like, oh, it's just one of the things I do, you're kind of going, oh,
yeah.
next week I'll do it. Next week I'll do it. One of these days I'll get around to it.
You're a whiskey connoisseur as well. I've seen some posts regarding that.
So how that happened was I'm not a big drinker generally, so coffee is kind of my main vice. But when you work in media, people send you in things from time to time. So somebody sent me in a nice little it was um I can't even remember the name of it. It's terrible, but yeah, they sent me just like a nice little whiskey that they were launching, and it was really good. I mean, as a not whiskey drinker, I really
Yeah,
enjoyed it. I'm sure, like, my brother's big into his whiskey, or like I've mates who are. I'm sure they would be able to give a more of a tasting to it, if you like. But I mean, I enjoyed it as a not big drinker, and it was enjoyable.
brilliant. Yeah. So we'll get into how we actually, how this actually happened. Like we
For
were,
sure.
myself and my wife Liz were traveling to Dublin for Scrappermania a few weeks back, and we texted in the show just to say we were on the way because the Ireland England game was on the same day, so
That's
everybody,
right. Yeah.
we didn't get to see it because we were standing in the queue to get into Scrappermania, so we had to go watch it the next day. And my friend's son actually got picked. He won a competition. He was one of the mascots
Stop. That's
for the
cool.
game, which was amazing. Like he got looked after pretty well.
VIP treatment. I love it.
Yeah, it was amazing for him. I'm delighted. But so we were talking about Scrappermania, and you reached out to us regarding it. So are you a big fan? You were a big fan of wrestling growing
Yeah,
up?
so I mean, look, wrestling is something I always had a huge interest in. I remember watching, like, Saturday night's main event and stuff,
Yeah,
like, way back in the day. Like, you're talking like Hulk Hogan,
yeah,
Yokozuna, Hacksaw Jim Dugan, like you're talking the Bushwhackers, like that kind of era. So I watched it all the way through. And I was only small. I remember I had a wrestling ring, the old blue one with
yeah,
the
yeah,
red, white, and blue ropes and the
yeah, yeah.
figures and British Bulldog and whatever else. So I always had this like weird fascination with wrestling and like the magic of it all. And I think it appeals to that kid in us all who's always like, you want the good guys to win so bad.
Yeah, yeah.
So I would watch that. Used to watch it with my dad actually back in the day. It was on, I don't know how we had it. I think we had a satellite dish, and we'd get it like on a Sunday on whatever channel it was on. I couldn't even tell you.
Yeah,
And it was on kind of Sunday tea time
yeah,
for whatever it was. So we would watch that like every single week. And like I was just enthralled by like the magic of it all, the kind of the showmanship, the pageantry, the athleticism, and the whole lot. And obviously, like, you know, you're cheering for the good guy. And I suppose as I got older, like, you know, I kind of drifted away from it for a couple of years and then back to it really like kind of from 98 onwards, just as kind
Yeah.
of the Monday Night Wars were kind of starting to kick in, the Attitude Era was starting to kick in. So really got back into it then in a big way. And yeah, I dip in and out kind of ever since, you know, the kind of way like we have the WWE network, and like, you know, when I'm at home kind of in the evening, like it's nothing else on, myself and my brother will go, right, do you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna watch like WCW's Halloween Havoc from
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, 1997. And it's like you look back on it and go, that was terrible, but like so good at the same time.
Yeah,
There's one match we love going to. It was a Chamber of Horrors, like Halloween. Have you seen that one?
yeah,
With an electric chair in it.
yeah, yeah,
Like you're watching it going, this is terrible, but this is
yeah.
so good as well. I can't stop watching it. So
People
yeah,
would
all the
probably
way through. It's just been part all the way through. I just love the spectacle and the showmanship of it and the whole lot.
Have you been able to attend any shows, WWE
So
shows?
you know, yeah, I've been to a couple of the kind of Raw tours or whatever else
Yeah,
when they
yeah.
come to Dublin. It's been a few years since I was there. Actually, last one I was at, I think Kane was fighting against Seth Rollins,
Oh,
if
yeah,
that
that's
makes
when
sense.
Seth
And
got injured, is it?
he blew his knee out, I
Yeah,
think,
yeah.
in that match. So that's the last one I was at. And then I've been to a couple of the OTT shows actually
Okay.
in the National Stadium.
Yeah,
And like I was like, this is so cool that there's just this whole community of people
yeah,
like in my backyard, so to speak, who are all into this thing that I'm into. Like, so kind of a big, you know, we'll dip in and out of the OTT stuff. Like one of my brothers, he's since moved to Korea where he's teaching English, but
nice.
he would go to all of them, like, you know,
Yeah,
on the regular. Like every time there was a show on, he'd be in at them. Like, so it's yeah, so get to go, you know, sometimes when we can fit it in. And again, it's like that when there's time, I'll stick it on and catch up on whatever's happened. But it's something that I would love to have more time for, you know.
yeah, yeah. And I know obviously your schedule is crazy with everything you're doing. Like, so I know it's something you reached out to us, you know, talking about, you know, maybe getting into wrestling, as in maybe do some voiceover for wrestling, or
Yeah, like I mean, it was something that I was thinking, like, you know, even from going to watch the shows in
yeah,
the National Stadium, whatever, like, you know, ring announcing or commentary or whatever else, or you know, is there a way to take what I do for a living and add? I was going to say value. I don't know how much value you get out of having me involved, but like,
I
you
think
know,
it would be.
just bringing the talents, for want of a better word, I have to the community to be of use. You know, the kind of way it's
Yeah,
something that
I could definitely see, you know, in some of the promotions there, like there's a good few promotions in Ireland now. So if it's not OTT, you've
yeah,
got Hard
yeah,
Knocks in Limerick, you've got
yeah.
RCW in Cork, you've also got Fight Factory in Dublin, Titanic in Belfast. There's a few other promotions that are opening up all around. So there's always opportunities, but
It's something I would love to get into doing.
the video production quality now for all the wrestling has gotten so good, and like
It's
voiceovers
amazing.
for that kind of stuff
Yeah,
is,
the
you know,
quality of the production is just
yeah,
really, really amazing. Like, I don't know, I think as Irish people, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think we have this like notion that like, oh, we're a little bit embarrassing or a little bit kind of like it's gonna look, you know, it'll look, oh, that looks very Irish. But I was blown away by the production value in
yeah,
the stuff that you guys have shared, and the OTT stuff and the Hard Knock stuff in particular has been like next level. It's
yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah, I you know, definitely reach out to them, and definitely think we could work something out where we
I
can.
know I've worked with Angus Oak,
Yeah,
McAnally a couple of times in kind of the voiceover
yeah,
realm.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I know he was doing some stuff as well with OTT for a while. So I was like,
He's their lead commentator now.
yeah, I was like, if Angus is doing that, I could do that, you know?
Yeah, 100%. I think it would be brilliant to have you involved in something like it. You know, if any of the promotions are watching, anybody from any promotions are watching, and you know they want to
Getting
work
into it
with you, like reach out through us or
for
reach out
sure.
to Stephen, you know,
Yeah,
directly on Instagram, or
delighted to help in any way I can, you know?
yeah, it would be great to have you involved. Just
Be
before
awesome.
we touch base on anything else, this weekend, Becky Lynch was on the Tommy Tiernan show. I'm wondering if
Yes.
you had to see it.
Yes, I saw
What
a
did
bit
you
of it.
think of the interview itself? Just on a, you know, as a presenter kind of thing for
Yeah,
Tommy
I
Tiernan?
thought it was a bit of a strange one, to be honest, right? I'm not, like, I always liked Tommy's comedy, like
Yeah,
back in the noughties when he came out first. I love this kind of manic energy brought to it. And then I thought he took a really kind of strange turn. Now, I don't know Tommy at all. Like,
yeah, yeah,
you know, he has a reputation to be a really good guy and he works really hard. The comedy kind of took a weird kind of turn into like just kind of rambling rants about things or whatever else. And he still has, like, I know the show is really highly revered, but I find with the show, it's either really good
hmm,
or you're kind of going, I don't get this at all. Like, this is a complete miss. And I think the interview with Becky Lynch was a bit of a strange one as well.
hmm,
I don't think he gave it, it was like, I don't want to say he disrespected it a little bit, but it was kind of a bit throwaway or something, like, you know,
yeah,
it wasn't as serious as, or as engaging or as open as some of the other interviews that I've seen him do.
Yeah, it's more understanding the industry more, like, because I know it's supposed to be unscripted and he's not supposed to know who the
Yeah,
guests
no, in fairness, like he's unscripted and he doesn't
are.
know
Yeah,
who come out until they come out. But I think the whole thing about that show is that, and he's shown loads of times that he is the guy who can get a conversation out of anyone,
yeah,
except for when he doesn't. Like, I mean, there was one with Roy Keane a few weeks ago as well, where Roy just gave him nothing, and as a result, it was kind of like, okay, cool, well, sure, we'll just leave it. So, but I think the Becky one was kind of a strange one as well. Like, she seemed like she wanted to chat, but
yeah.
I just don't think he really kind of led it in the right way. Maybe he just wasn't as versed in the kind of wrestling world as, I mean, it is kind of niche at the back of it all, you know?
I can understand why he would have been, because if he didn't know anything about the industry, like, there's no way for him to understand it, because it is.
You can't bluff your way through it, like, you know?
This is, I thought this is, I think it was one of the first time Becky's ever done an interview on Irish
Yeah.
TV,
Yeah.
and there hasn't been that many. I know Seamus was on the Late Late Show once or twice, like, and that's it. Like, and it was,
Yeah.
I was proud of Becky, the way she stood up for the industry, and she stood up for herself, and she didn't back down at all. Like, she held herself, and she showed that she is a star that she is. So I'm proud of her that way.
She did an awesome job. But
yeah,
I just think it was kind of one of those where I think they underestimated it completely. And I think people fall into two camps, and I hate generalizing like this, but you either get wrestling and the craft of it and the whole lot, and you understand that yes, the outcomes are decided, and the storylines or whatever else, but they actually are physical athletes putting themselves in those positions. They actually do get injured quite badly. There actually is a whole element of, like, when they're bleeding. Like, I don't think you either get that or you really don't get it at all, and you're looking for blood capsules, or you're looking for, like,
it's
the kind of the halfway through it.
The misconception from the 90s that people thought, it's fake. Hulk Hogan, early 90s, like, Hulk Hogan's fake and wrestling's fake in their heads, and their parents have brought that down to the kids, and it's that generation of people who aren't into wrestling have continued it on.
Yeah.
Like, we grew up, like yourself and myself, like, we grew up watching wrestling. Like, my uncle, he, like, when I was like maybe 4 or 5 years old, like, he had WrestleMania 2 on VHS.
Oh
Like,
man, throwback.
that was it. Like, we'd go visit, and my granny and my uncle lived in the same house, so when we go to visit my granny, we'd be in the sitting room watching WrestleMania 2, and that we were hooked on it. And it wasn't until, like, later on, like, that we actually got to watch it regularly because of being on Sky. So it's a shame that people, you understand, not everybody's going to like everything. Nobody like.
Yeah, of course, it's not for everyone, but there is this kind of snobbery around it almost,
But, like, there's no reason to disrespect either, because regardless of the conversation you've had, any person who's not a wrestling fan and they find out you like wrestling, the first thing generally that comes out of their mouth is, it's fake, right?
Yeah, but, like, I think as well, and it's come up before in different kind of chats with people who weren't into it. I always say, like, you need to go away and read "Have a Nice Day" by Mick Foley. Like, I think that was kind of a real moment for a lot of people who, whether you were into it or not, like, fans read it and loved him even more because of it. But a lot of people who weren't fans read it and went, actually, like, bloody hell, like, this guy's been really through it, and, like, the stories in that are just different class. I know it can be hard to come by these days, but you'll find it in a charity shop or maybe online somewhere. But
somewhere. It was like a #1 bestseller.
Yeah, it was massive. I never read the follow-up ones. I don't know if I missed out on much of that, but I have read loads of books by loads of different wrestlers, and still the one I'll come back to. And this is a really cheesy, nerdy thing to say, right? So I'm going to admit this now to you and to all the listeners as well, right? I find, or it's maybe a ridiculous parallel to draw, but I find reading Mick's story and kind of starting out in the business and getting the breaks he got to be quite similar to media in a way. You meet a lot of the similar personalities. Now, obviously, I'm not jumping off the top of Hell in a Cell every week. I'm not going to the actual physical limits, but there's certain parallels you can draw to, like, how you get your start and how you get on in the business, and, like, the politics that can hold you back that aren't really anything to do with you, the chances you have to take, the opportunities you miss, and, like, the ups and downs. Now, obviously, as I say, nothing physical, but, like, there are certain parallels to draw in it. So I find, like, when I get into a bit of a rut with my career, or I'm looking for the next opportunity, I dig out Have a Nice Day and kind of go, actually, there's a road to follow through this.
That is a good way of looking at it, because you have to use other people's experiences to highlight your own. Like, if you're looking for something, don't be scared to reach out to other people.
Sure. Yeah.
And stuff. Maybe somebody who's led a similar path and gotten there, like, it could inspire you to be whatever.
Absolutely. It's something I always say to, so I do a bit of mentoring of kind of people coming into the broadcasting industry. And I did a bit of lecturing and stuff in the past. And I will always say, like, read a broad spectrum of autobiographies from people who've been not just in media, but sport and wrestling in particular is something I'll always push them to and go, look, I know it's a strange one. I know this is out of left field, but pick this up and read it and just kind of take something away from the journey and the path. And you'll see that nothing is linear, I suppose, in a roundabout deep way. That's very deep and meaningful, isn't it? I know.
That's a nice way to put a bullet point on the conversation. Everything is like connected similarly. Media, sports, wrestling. There is all a similarity.
There's a common thread,
Yeah. Stephen, been an absolute pleasure having you on. Is there anything you'd like to plug? Anything else is coming up that people need to know about?
Not at all. Just as I say, if anybody wants voiceovers, ring announcers, or anything else, you can find me on Instagram at Stephen Daly Show, or stephendaly.ie is the best way to get in touch. It's been an absolute pleasure, and keep up the great work. I know you guys are involved with Hard Knocks, and I really love watching the stuff online, and the podcast is an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thanks very much.
Enjoy.
Before I let you go, Stephen, you have one chance to sell yourself. You can pick one wrestler. You're going to do their introduction. Who are you going to do?
I'm going to pick John Cena.
Okay.
Is that all right? So let me just warm up for this here now. Do you know what I mean? Now, making his way to the ring from West Newbury, Massachusetts, he is the WWE champion, John Cena.
Brilliant. Well, Stephen, been a pleasure having you on. If you are staying up, I hope you do stay up, or if you can stay up to watch WrestleMania this weekend, enjoy it, or if not, enjoy it the next morning or the next week.
Sure. Thank you so much for the chat, man. It's been great.
Thanks very much having you on, and we'll be in touch again. We'll reach out back out to you.
For sure. Thanks so much. Take care.
Have a good day, man.